بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. الحمد لله، نحمد الله سبحانه وتعالى على هذا الشهر المبارك. باركم الله في شهركم. الحمد لله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to all the guests and visitors here, and also people that are online. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless this Ramadan, make it a time of healing and facilitation and ease for people everywhere. A lot of troubles in many different places, but this month comes with its gifts, and those who are open to those gifts, inshallah, will receive them. Alhamdulillah, we were looking last week at this amazing, extraordinary chapter of the Qur'an, Surah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins with one of the amazing letters that several of the chapters in the Qur'an begin with, like Alif Lam Mim. The Qur'an actually at the outset in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah begins after the opener, after Al-Fatiha, begins with Alif Lam Mim. And these muqatta'ats, a lot of different opinions about them, but overall the mufassirun tend to end with Allahu Ta'ala A'lam. Allah knows their meaning. There are a lot of different interpretations in the 29 times that they're mentioned. These 14 letters that are also called the Huruf al-Nuraniyah. And there's a lot of analysis about these letters, even in the Fatiha, how many of them are used in the Fatiha. They're half of the Arabic letters themselves, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using them. I think one of the meanings for me is the idea that the structure of language is built upon meaning. It's not built upon meaninglessness, which gets to the core of what this surah is about, because one of the extraordinary aspects of the time we're living in, and it's been for some time in particularly in the Western world, this idea of what's called nihilism or nihilism. Nihilism is the idea that nothing has meaning, that there's no meaning. Everything is empty. And this was something that the Jahili Arabs had concluded about the world. They had concluded essentially that it was meaningless. They said, "Namutu wa nahya wa ma yuhlikuna illa dahr." We die and we live, and nothing kills us except time. It's just time. And for them, time was just this experience that we're having that really had no meaning. And their meaning was in enjoyment of life. If you read the Jahili poets, they're very interesting, and they had many interesting things to say, and they still tell us interesting things for people that study the Jahili poets. They're quoted often in our tradition, and certainly for language. But this idea of nihilism, of adamiyya, this is how the Arabs did ta'rib of it. Adamiyya, adam is nothing. Nihil in Latin, nihil is nothing. So nihilism is this idea that ultimately the ground of being is empty, that there's nothing there. And so this surah is really a refutation of that idea. Nietzsche actually goes into 3 types of nihilism that he identifies. And the great Japanese Keiji Nishitani wrote a book called Overcoming Nihilism, very interesting. And he quotes a lot from Nietzsche. But in that book, the Japanese philosopher argues, and he wrote the book right after World War II, when Japan was completely devastated. Their cities have been destroyed with firebombing, and people were empty and lost. Their emperor came out in Western clothes for the first time as almost a message to them that we've been defeated, and now we have to imitate those who defeated us in order to understand their power. And this is where Japan became the great imitators of the West, and actually in some ways superseded them in production. When I was young, made in Japan was not a compliment, whereas now Japan makes often superior technology to other places. And so this idea of nihilism is very important historically. But one of the things that Nishitani says is that he said that nihilism is a perennial problem. It doesn't go away. It comes, especially at times when people are in hayra, when they're confused, when they're perplexed. And often what happens in those times is they use distractions. So one of the things that Dorothy Sayers argues in her amazing introduction to the Divine Comedy, she has a section on the deadly sins, and she talks about lust, and she says that lust is something that really emerges in a culture that has lost meaning. It becomes a source of their meaning, and so they begin to explore sexuality as a ersatz spirituality, because of what Nietzsche would refer to as the Dionysian quality of it, the wildness of it, of getting out of oneself, which all religion is at the root there to take us out of ourselves so that we're not self-absorbed. And so I just want to just go a little bit over what we did before for the people that weren't there with us last week, and then we'll go into the next section. But Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, it begins with Qaf, and then it's an oath with Qur'an al-Majid. So the wow there is al-Qasam, and then it's majroor bil-Qasam, wa Qur'an al-Majid. Allah swears an oath by the Qur'an al-Majid. And Majid is a word which means sharif, or dhu sharafin wa karam. So the Majid is something the Arabs desire to be considered Majid, to be, in fact, it's an Arabic name, to be considered somebody who was Majid. One of the things that our scholars say about wal Quran al-Majid is man tabbaqahu majuda, that if you actually apply the Quran, you will become Majid. Like it will transform you into a sharif and a kareem person, noble and generous. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he was Amjad al-Bashar. He was the most glorious of human beings, because he was the one who followed the Quran most closely. Kana khuruquhu al-Quran. So Allah swears this oath, and they differ on what the muqsam alayh is, what follows it. And I think Razi and others conclude that really the best argument is that it's mahdoof, that it's really swearing an oath, innaka mundhir wa innahum mab'uthun. Verily, you are a warner, and they will be raised up. Now, one of the things about the nihilism of the pre-Islamic Arabs, the Jahili Arabs, is that they actually believed that there was no afterlife. Many cultures have a belief in the afterlife. Even the most primitive cultures, Aboriginal peoples have beliefs in afterlife. The Greeks had a belief in the afterlife. Native peoples here had beliefs in afterlife. It's very rare in history to find people that actually don't believe in an afterlife. But the Arabs did not believe in an afterlife. So it's very interesting that they didn't. And there are many, many verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that, giving us signs that there is a resurrection of the dead. In Fussilat, Allah says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنَّكَ تَرَى الْأَرْضَ خَاشِعَةً. You see the earth khashi'a. In Arabic, khashi'a means to be fearful, have khushu'. But here it means yabisa, mughabbara, qahta, that it's dry and barren and dead. In other words, desiccated. There's no life in it. فَإِذَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْهَا الْمَاء. When we send down earth on it, اهتزت warabat. It shakes and then brings forth the growth. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِي أَحْيَاهَا لَمُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. The one who brought that dead earth to life will bring you to life. So it's telling you to look at the earth and how it was dead and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought the earth back to life. And He does this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this constantly, everywhere. It's happening all the time. Right now, there's people, there's in such heedlessness, they miss the blooming of the trees. People don't even notice these things. But the tree in winter, it looks dead. In fact, if you go out there, I actually asked the gardener, is that tree dead? He said, no, it's in hibernation. It looks dead, but then it comes back to life. And this is happening constantly. There are so many examples of this around us. So then, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَالَّذِي نَزَّلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً بِقَدْرٍ فَأَنشَرْنَا بِهِ بَلْدَةً مَيْتًا كَذَلِكَ تُخْرَجُونَ. And again, we sent down from the heaven water biqadar. In other words, even the water yesterday, they measure it. It's approximation, but they can measure water. But Allah knows the exact amount that is coming down to us. If it's too much, it won't produce. If it's too little, it won't produce. So when you look, Allah's giving us the qadar, the portion that we need in order for the earth to bring forth its fruits and gifts. An amazing aspect of life on earth. They said, وَقَالُوا, that in hiya illa hayatuna dunya. This is just the life of the world. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمَبْعُوثِينَ. And we're not going to be resurrected. So this was the belief of the Arabs, that they wouldn't be resurrected. So this chapter is almost entirely about the resurrection, Qaf. And the Prophet used it constantly as a reminder, as a wa'al. Hisham bint al-Haritha said that she memorized it from hearing it so often on the tongue of the Prophet ﷺ. They shared an oven, and when they used to come to bake, they shared an oven. But she heard him many times, and she said she memorized it just from hearing it constantly. So then they say, عَجِبُوا أَنْ جَاءَهُمْ مُنذِرٌ مِّنْهُمْ. They're ajibu, the Arabs, if they say ajab, if they say a'jabani, it's positive, istihsanan, they like it. إِذَا عَجِبْتُ, it's just strange. They wonder about it. Ajibtu, it's a strange thing. They don't know the cause of it. They consider it like what we would say in our culture, weird. It's just strange. But it can also mean wondrous. بل عجبوا أن جاءهم منذر منهم فقال الكافرون هذا شيء عجيب. So here Allah uses kafirun instead of mushrikun, even though they were mushrikun. And there are different types of kufr. Shirk is one type of kufr. There's another type where they actually believe in God, they believe in the last day, they believe in some of the prophets, but they reject some of the prophets. That's another type of kufr. That's not the kufr of atheism or ilhad, or the kufr of the mushrik who associates with Allah. But kufr is a very important term in the Qur'an. And if you're reading the book with us, Izutsu's book, the great Japanese, I'd have to call him an Occidentalist, because he was in Japan studying the Muslims as opposed to an Orientalist. But he, extraordinary linguist and extraordinary scholar. And he's written several books about Islam because he was fascinated. In fact, he's the only person in Iran, in their great academy of philosophy, he's the only I don't know if he was a non-Muslim, but he's considered a non-Muslim. I find it hard to believe somebody could have that depth of knowledge and see how extraordinary the Quran was and not be a believer. But in any case, he's the only person that they have a picture of him on their wall, of all the great philosopher scholars in the Iranian tradition. He's the only one, and he taught in Iran. But he had an incredible knowledge of languages. He knew over 30 languages, like Dr. Cleary, a very similar genius for language, among many other things. But he analyzed the word kufr in the Quran, and he sees all of these different, he gives you all of these different perspectives on what kufr is. So And this is why in this translation of the Qur'an, which is, inshallah, we've been working on it this Ramadan with some of us to try to republish it because it's been out of print for a long time. But this translation of Qur'an, one of the things that Dr. Kuliri did in the translation is he doesn't always translate kafir with the same word. And in that way, he's showing that the multifaceted nature of kufr in the Qur'an, that it can't be fixed with one translation. There's not one word that can really get to. Disbeliever is one aspect of it. But the word is, and it might, I don't know, sometimes you have these linguistic coincidences, but cover in English is related in meaning. So cover, to cover over, is exactly what it means. And that's why أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارَ نَبَاتُهُ. The kuffar in the Quran are the farmers in one verse. That when they saw the nabat, they were, it pleased them to see the nabat. So the kafir is a farmer because yakfuru, he covers the seed with soil. So the kafir is the one who covers over the truth. He hides the truth. He conceals the truth. Or he covers over his blessings. So one of the meanings of it is ingrate. That there's an ingratitude in these people, the kuffar. They're ungrateful. And Allah warns us in many, many places in the Quran about this idea of forgetting the blessings of Allah, to remember the blessings of Allah. Part of dhikr is remembering the blessings of Allah. In ta'uddu ni'matullahi la tuhsaha. If you attempt to enumerate the blessings of Allah, you will never enumerate them. And one of the dangers of dunya is when you reflect too much on the world, on the negative qualities of the world, you can fall into a depression, you can fall into a state of ingratitude when you don't focus on the positive. And that's why Iblis wants you to focus on the negative. Iblis wants to fill your life with all these troubles, make you feel despair. That's the whole game of Iblis. He swore an oath to Allah that he would lead the majority of humanity astray. And he said that you will find that most of them are not grateful. They're not shakirin. So it's a very dangerous thing to fall into ingratitude. So he says, Qaf, by the glorious recital, but they think it's strange that a warner has come to them from their midst, and those who scoff say. So here he's translating kafaru as scoff. This is an astonishing thing. When we have died and are dust, like if we إِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا ذَلِكَ رَجْعٌ بَعِيدٌ. If we die and then we're turab, we're dust, ذَلِكَ رَجْعٌ بَعِيدٌ. That is a very remote possibility, right? قَدْ عَلِمْنَا مَا تَنْقُصُ الْأَرْضُ مِنْهُمْ وَعِنْدَنَا كِتَابٌ حَفِيظٌ. We know what the earth has diminished from them, has taken from them, because as we when we're buried in the earth, except for the incorruptibles, and they're real, the incorruptibles are real. There are people who do not, they don't perish from the earth. And many, many people have seen incorruptibles. There was a study in Discovery some time ago where they let people into the Vatican where they keep the incorruptible bodies. And these are pre-Islamic saints that were preserved in their bodies. And some of them they mummified. A lot of the popes actually, to kind of ensure that they didn't corrupt, they had them embalmed. But there are people that don't. The earth does not take them. And I heard from Sheikh Mahmoud Sawaf, the Iraqi scholar, and these are people I believe. He was a man of great integrity, but I heard him. He was in a group of people that reburied Sayyidina Hamza when they had floods and the grave actually got uncovered, and so they reburied him, and he said he saw him fully intact, his body. And there are many examples of that. So it's not, and this is in other traditions as well. It's not just the Muslims that have incorruptibles. There are other traditions of this. One of the big impacts when I was a 12-year-old, I went to an Orthodox summer camp in Greece, and they took us to the island of Zakynthos, and there was a Orthodox saint in their tradition whose body was completely intact, open to air, and we were told that they still cut the nails and cut the hair of this saint. But there are many, many examples of that in history and still today. So it's not as... But Allah says they think we're just going to be dust, and Allah says no. And then we have Kitabun Hafid. We have a book, Kitab, which is a Lawh al-Mahfuz. The Lawh al-Mahfuz has everything. One of the most amazing things of our time, and you have to consider this, is that nobody had this idea of having all your information in one thing, right? And Allah says, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. We will show them our signs in themselves and on the horizon until it becomes clear to them that this is true. I mean, if you look at this, just this machine, the amount of information that you have access to, just from, and this is like a lawh, you know, the actual shape of it. It's like a lawh. The amount of information that you have access to just in this machine. And then this is just what we have access to. What the intelligence community has access to is a whole other thing, because all the telephones are being monitored by computers. They have supercomputers that monitor all the telephone. They have keywords that if they pick up, if they hear in their words. Now they have AI that can do instantaneous translation, so they don't need to have translators actually listening in and doing these things. This is all human beings with these pea brains. We look very clever, but in the grand scheme of things, we're very insignificant. And people, this is the thing at the time we're living in. There's so many signs. And so this idea of a Lawh al-Mahfuz, where all information is contained, the fact that Allah has shown us this miniature example of this, where they believe they're going to put all human information, everything will be available to everybody instantaneously. All the 25 million books in the Library of Congress, all human information that can be researched and accessed almost immediately. And then Allah says, بَلْ كَذَبُوا بِالْحَقِّ لَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ فَهُمْ فِي أَمْرٍ مَرِيجٍ. They deny the truth. They deny. This is takdhib. This is one of the hallmarks of kufr, is to yukadhib, is to deny it. It's not true. It's just asatirul awwaleen. And this is an ancient, again, many prophets were belied. They were attacked by their people. They say these are just the mythology of the past. That's their view. It's just mythology. You're believing in fairy tales. There's a British atheist who has made a second career. His first career was in science, but he's made a whole second career on this idea of imaginary beings and how ridiculous it is for people to believe in imaginary beings. And he goes around telling people that you believe in these fairy tales, but if it helps you get through the day, that's okay. Just don't try to tell me about that. And these people have always existed. There's nothing new about these people. They existed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They existed before that time, and they've always been there. And so, لَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ فَهُمْ فِي أَمْرٍ مَرِيجٍ. They're in this doubt. So they say, oh, he's kahin, he's sha'ir, he's majnoon. They don't have any one thing they're fixed on, and even the same one person will change his view about the Prophet. One of the things that the Mufassirun say is that anybody who if you deviate from the truth, you will always be in a type of amr marij, that you'll be in a type of confusion. That if you're not straight, if you're not following the truth, you will become confused. And then أَفَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. This is a really important thing, because I think one of the main reasons why we have so much nihilism and so much lack of belief is artificial light. And it's very interesting that we call it artificial light. The fact that we call it artificial light, it's not the nur that Allah created. It's I mean, he did in the sense that in Allah khaliqu kulli sani'in wa san'atihi. Allah creates every maker and what he makes. But it's artificial in that we invented it, and these are human products. Whereas the light, the natural light of the stars have been put out. One of the words that you can use to translate أَفَرَمْ يَنْظُرُوا إِلَى السَّمَاءِ, have they not considered the sama? Haven't they considered the heavens? فَوْقَهُمْ, haven't they considered the heavens فَوْقَهُمْ, above them? The word consider is from a Latin word, which is sider, which means star. And so to consider something is to reflect on it deeply. And the thing that humans have always reflected deeply on is the heavens. And all of our sciences come from reflection on the heavens. Mathematics, لِتَعْلَمُوا عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ وَالْحِسَابِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a reckoning in the skies so that you would learn mathematics. So the loss of the stars, they've been put out. You go out in the night sky, you don't see stars anymore. When people can see stars, it will force them to reflect. It's the nature of the stars. That's why in the Timaeus, Plato actually says that God created sight so that we might look up at the heavens and see the stars and see the perfect order of the heavenly world, that we might want to bring that order down into the disordered world of humanity. Like to align ourselves. This is this vertical alignment with the heaven, to align ourselves with the stars. And this is why if you look at our prayer, it's all based on this alignment with heavenly bodies. Our prayer is based on alignment with heavenly bodies. Our fasting is based on alignment with heavenly bodies. We break our fast with alignment with heavenly bodies. Allah is telling us, look at the sky. That's how you determine your prayer times. Look at the moon. That's how you determine مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. Like this is how, it's the heavens that we order our lives with. Our spiritual lives are ordered with the heavens. وَبِالنَّجْمِ هُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ. By the stars they are guided. So what happens إِذَا طُمِسَتْ? When نُجُوم إِذَا طُمِسَتْ, you know, when the stars are put out. I mean, this is one of the signs. Al-Ghumari said that sign wasn't for the akhirah, it was for dunya. Like the nujum have been put out. So Allah says, consider. Reflect on the sign. كَيْفَ بَنَيْنَاهَا وَزَيَّنَّاهَا. And we ornamented it. We ornamented it. So there's a zina in the heavens. وَمَا لَهَا مِن فُرُوجٍ. There's no gaps in it. So haven't they observed the sky above them? How we have constructed it and adorned it without any gap in it? And then to look at the earth. وَالْأَرْضَ مَدَدْنَاهَا وَأَلْقَيْنَا فِيهَا رَوَاسِيَ. We place down the earth and we put in it rawasiya, these thawabit, these great mountains that are anchored. وَأَنْبَتْنَا فِيهَا مِنْ كُلِّ زَوْجٍ بَهِيجٍ. And we put in it every beautiful type, every no'a, every beautiful type, every pair also. تَبْصِرَةً وَذِكْرًا لِكُلِّ عَبْدٍ مُنِيبٍ. As a tabsira, yubasiruka, in order to enlighten you. And that's actually the word, as an enlightenment and a reminder for every repentant devotee. Yubasiruka, it brings light to you. It gives you vision, it gives you inner sight, it gives you basira. And so that idea of the earth, some of them actually said this is a really nice example, rhetorically, where the tabsira refers to the heavens and the dhikra refers to the sky, to the earth. Because tabsira it's something to help you see, which certainly the sky does, and it helps you see the glory of God. The heavens declare the glory of God. But the dhikra is a constant reminder. So the earth is a constant reminder because the heavens stay the same. If you go out in the sky any time of the day, it's always the same. But the earth is constantly changing. So you have this stability, and then you have this change. And these two, so one is a tabsira and one is a dhikra, a reminder. For every munib is the one who constantly goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then وَنَزَّلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً مُبَارَكًا, we set down blessed water, because the water is one of the great blessings of the world. And to lose water is one of the great tribulations. People can't survive without water for very long. And one of the troubles in the world now are the water tables are declining all over. In Central California, the water tables are declining. It's one of the signs of the latter days is the water tables decline. And so this is a huge problem. This is a huge problem. The blessing of water, it's one of the great blessings that Allah has given us. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ, we made every living thing from water. Without water, we desiccate, dry up, and die. And so Allah reminds us about this. فَأَنبَتْنَا بِهِ جَنَّاتٍ وَحَبَّ الْحَصِيدِ. And so He says, we sent down from the rain blessed water, making gardens sprout thereby, and seeds yielding crops, and the lofty date palms with layers of fruit stalks. So this tal' is the beginning of the date palm, and you have the male and the female. So you use the pollination from the male tal' to impregnate the female tal'. And this is how we get the dates, which are one of the great miracles of the trees that Allah has put on the earth. And then وَالنَّخْلَ بَاسِقَةً لَهَا طَلْعٌ نَضِيدٌ رِزْقًا لِلْعِبَادِ. This is provision for the servants, both those who are obedient and those who are disobedient. وَأَحْيَيْنَا بِهِ بَلْدَةً مَيْتًا. So now all of this was to take us to, we bring and we bring with this water, we bring a dead earth to life. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, بَيْنَ نَفْخَتَيْن أَرْبَعُونَ. They said, يَوْمًا فَقَالَ أَبَيْتَ. And then they said, شهرًا فقال أبيت. And then they said, سنة فقال أبيت. So between the نفخة الأولى والثانية, this is the إذا نفخ في الصور, when the blast is the trumpet is blown. The Israfil is, according to the hadith, literally with the head high like this, waiting for the order to blast the trumpet. And the Prophet said that there would be 40, and he didn't specify what they would be, that 40. But he said after that, he said, يُنزِلُ رَبُّكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَيَنبُتُونَ كَمَا يَنبُتُ الْبَقْلُ. We will be reborn again. And again, Allahu Ta'ala, I mean, Allahu A'lam what these things mean, but it's very clear that there's going to be some imbat. Allah is going to bring us back to life, just like we see the dead earth come back to life. This is the analogy. So there's a literal analogy there that's very clear. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, "Kullu shayin yabla min ibni Adam, illa adman wahida," except for one adman wahida. And he said, وَهُوَ الْعَجْبُ الذَّنَبِ. It's the عَجْبُ الذَّنَبِ. And then he said, وَمِنْهَا يُرَكَّبُ الْخَلْقِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. From this thing that does not, it's indestructible. So he said it's what they call the us in the commentaries. It's the coccyx. But it doesn't mean it's the literal coccyx, because the Arabs have, just like in English rhetoric, the something that is part of something can be called the whole thing. And so, Allahu A'lam, all you need to recreate the human being, theoretically now, is one cell. One cell. Because it has the entire genetic information. Just one cell. To see the cell, it has to be magnified 400 times. To see a cell under a microscope, you have to magnify it 400 times. And then you're just seeing the cell, you're not seeing what's in it. You have to even go deeper to see that. So there's some portion of us that's indestructible. No matter what you do to the human being, that portion is indestructible. Allah doesn't need, obviously, the material means. Allah can simply say kun fayakun, but these are the sunan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just the fact that we now know this about human beings, that a human being can be theoretically recreated from one cell. And the Prophet told us, and he used the word yurakkab, which is very interesting too, because this is combinatorial DNA, is one of the words they use for it is tarkiba, which is the same root word, you know, because it's an assembly. It's like yurakkab, it's putting it together. So then Allah says, after كَذَلِكَ الْخُرُوجِ, and like that you will be brought forth. كَذَلِكَ تُخْرَجُونَ تُرْجَعُونَ, you will be restored. So all of that was to bring us to this point, that they deny the ba'ath. Haven't they considered, reflected deeply, thought about this? And had they done that, they would have arrived at a very different conclusion. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds, and this is partly tasliyah for the Prophet ﷺ, but also for us to know that this is the sunnah of the prophets. كَذَّبَتْ قَبْلُهُمْ قَوْمُ نُوحٍ, the people of Nuh before them, they denied the Nuh alayhi salam, وَأَصْحَابُ الرَّسِّ وَثَمُودَ وَعَادٌ وَفِرْعَوْنَ وَإِخْوَانُ لُوطٍ وَأَصْحَابُ الْأَيْكَةِ وَقَوْمُ تُبَّعٍ كُلٌّ كَذَّبَ الرُّسُلَ حَقَّ الْوَعِيدِ. So all of these, they denied the prophets, all of them. So and there's other ones mentioned in the Qur'an, but these are the primary ones, and in this ayah, obviously, they're put together. The people of Nuh alayhi salam did da'wah for a long time, and finally they were destroyed. Ashab al-Rassi are a very unusual, it's all we know about them. And Al-Razi said there's nothing thabit on them. There are different views about who they were. There's a view that they worshiped the pine tree, the Sanobar. There's also a view that they were in Yamama. There's a view they were in Azerbaijan, different places. There's a view also that they were part of Thamud, and then there was one of the Israeli prophets was sent to them. There's a very interesting narration that used from Sayyidina Ali that mentions that the prophet came to them, and they ended up throwing him in a well, Rasal. They put him in this well, and there was only one person that believed him. It was a black slave. And there's a munkar hadith that says, أول من يدخل الجنة العبد الأسود. The first one to enter paradise is that black slave that believed in that prophet. He was the only one that believed in him. Wallahu ta'ala alam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is قوم نوح وأصحاب الرس وثمود وعاد وفرعون. And then Fir'aun is throughout the Qur'an, the story of Fir'aun. And they given so many signs, and finally at the very end, Fir'aun actually does the testimony as he's drowning, but completely blinded. And then again the Ashab Ikhwanu Lutin are also, they're his brothers through Musahara. So he was married into that people. But again, they denied him. He came with very, the angels came and they denied him, and they were destroyed. And each one of these groups have different sins, which is one of the really amazing things about our time, is you see all the sins. In the past, there was only one or two sins that destroyed a people. Whereas now with the modern people, you see all of them compounded. And so then Allah says, "Wa ashabul aikati," these are the people of the woods, the thickets, is sometimes translated it. I think Dr. Cleary translated as the people of the companions of the wood. So it's a shajar al-multaf. It's a thick forest. And again, difference of opinion. Some say that Shu'aib was sent to them, that they're different from the people of Midian, but they were, the same prophet was sent to them. Thamud are the people of Salih, the camel, and they kill the camel. Ad are the people of Hud. Hud is a very important Arabian prophet that, all the prophets are important, but he has a chapter named after him in the Qur'an, which is an important chapter that the Prophet ﷺ used to recite. They're all important. You have to be careful what you say. But the Prophet recited it every Friday with Kahf. So that's one of the secrets of Hud, is that it's to be recited every Friday for people. The baseline is Kahf, the himma is Kahf and Hud together. So, and then kullun kadhaba ar-rusul fa haqqa wa'id. All of them denied the prophets. fa haqqa wa'id. Thabata. Haqqa thabata. So the wa'id, and this is the wa'id is the threat. You know, is what when Allah threatens. Awa'ada. So it's a wa'id is a threat. Wa'ad is a promise. And then Allah says, Afa'ina bil khalq al-awwal. Did we weary from the first creation? Did the first creation exhaust us? In other words, we can't do it again. This is a question to the Arabs. In other words, you see the first creation. And one of the reasons that the Arabs denied the second creation is they said, why do a second creation when you already did the first one? Like, you don't build a house and then destroy the house to rebuild it. This is one of their arguments, that it didn't make sense to them. Like, why would you take a perfectly good thing and then destroy it to rebuild it? That was one of their arguments. So Allah is saying, first of all, لا يسأل عما يفعل. He's not asked about what he does. وهم يسألون. But they are asked. It's not our business to determine why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen to do this. But He's put us into this world and into this body, and the body breaks down and dissipates as we get older. Even while we're still alive, things tend to wear out. Osteoporosis, the bones actually begin to break down. The eyes diminish, the hearing, even the nerves begin to diminish in their effectiveness. All these things are the natural part of the curvilinear growth of man, which was represented in many masjids, including the Prophet ﷺ's masjid, not at his time, but in the Ottoman masjid. This curvilinear, these are the nights and days. So they put the black and the white to represent the night and the day. And then this is the life of man. It's a curvilinear life. So you have the night and the day, and here's the mihrab, which is the place where you wage war. Mihrab is the tool by which you fight. So it's ism ala. It's the tool by which you fight. And they used to have mihrab in the house. All the Sahaba had a mihrab in their house. So that was what they used to fight themselves, to struggle with themselves. And so this curvilinear nature of life it's just part of life. We're all going to die. We were all not here. I mean, I don't know how the oldest person in the room is. I might be that person. But really, we weren't here that long ago. We weren't here that long ago. And there were all these other people having all the same problems, and fighting and arguing, and family tribulations, and the liars and the cheaters and the righteous and the upright, the people taking care of the orphans, the people neglecting the orphans, the people causing the orphans, right? I mean, all this is dunya. And we're going to be gone. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that in 100 years, nobody will be alive on the earth. That's called the generation. That's the qarn. 100 years. Nobody will be alive on the earth. That's what he said. He told the Sahaba, in 100 years, nobody alive today will be alive. In Siraj al-Muluk, he said that the Indians, and one of the interesting things about the early Muslims is they quoted from India a lot. They had no problem with the India. They actually considered the Indians to have a lot of wisdom. And so they actually quote these great Hindu sages because they saw them as wise and they had things to tell us. They had no problem quoting them. But they said that there was a city in India where they would have a celebration every 100 years where everybody would come out and the king would have them announce, is anybody here who saw the previous celebration? And only one or two old people would come up. They'd be like 110, 120, and they would come up. And then they would tell the people what they remembered, who was king, and what the people were doing, and and it was to remind them of this ephemeral nature of the world, that we will be out of the world soon enough. And so it's amazing. And then Qawmu Tubba are very interesting. He's only mentioned twice in the Qur'an. Here in Qaf, and then I think in Furqan. Dukhan, yeah. So Qawmu Tubba are the Tababi'a, were the rulers of Yemen. So they called them Tubba, was like Qaisar, or in the Romans, they would have Caesar, Kisra in Persia. So the Tubba were the rulers of the Nejas in Ethiopia. They have different names for rule. Like here we call them president. Some people. They say he's not my president. Yeah. But anyway, here we have president. So the Qawmu Tubba were the people that were the people of Yemen. They're Himyarites. So the Himyarite are the brothers of the Kahlan. The Kahlan are the majority of Yemenis, and the Kahlan spread out. The Ghasasina and the Lakhmiyun were in Iraq. The Ghasasina were in Palestine. So the Arabs have been in Palestine long before. I mean, this idea the Arabs conquered Palestine and there were no Arabs in Palestine. The Muslims did conquer Palestine, but there were plenty of Arabs in Palestine long before the Muslims ever got there. So this idea that they weren't, and if you want a Hollywood proof of that, Ben-Hur has an Arab with the horses that he gives to Ben-Hur so Hollywood put them in there. That's a historical novel, Ben-Hur. It was based on historical, and they tried to make it as historically accurate as possible. So the Arab was there. So, they say, oh, these people weren't there. We're the indigenous people. No, there's always been Arabs in Palestine. There have always been Arabs in Palestine. And many of those Arabs that are now Christians, and if they do their DNA, they'll find Jews that converted. Because many Jews converted to Islam, many Jews converted to Christianity. So even the Semitic people there, the Semites were not blonde hair and blue-eyed. Those are called Europeans or Caucasians from the Caucasus. They're in the north because people where the sun is heavy, they're brown. And it's millennia. It's not going to happen like in 1,000 years or 2,000 years. I mean, it's not going to change. There have been African Americans here for 400, 500 years. They're still black. So the people that are in the Middle East, they're all, I mean, Syrians are light-skinned, but many of them are Circassians. They're from the Caucasus Mountains. They're from those regions that came down. They were Turks as well. I mean, that's why when they started doing DNA, they found very strange things like the Iranians are more Arab than the Tunisians. They have more Arab genetic material in their DNA than the Tunisians do. So, but there have always been Arabs in that region. But Qawmu Tubba, so Tubba was, his name is Asad al-Kamil, he's called sometimes, Abu Karib. This is a very interesting man. So about 700 years, so this is before Christ, about 700 years, he actually went out to conquer. Like he was a king, he had an army, he wanted to go out and conquer. They say he got as far as Samarkand, Allah Ta'ala alam. But in any case, when he went to Medina, and he had no problem with the Medinese. They were the Yathrib people then. So he left his son there as a governor. Well, they ended up killing him. So he set out, he wanted to destroy the city of Medina. So he went back to destroy the city. So he would fight them in the day, and in the nighttime they would send food to his army. So he couldn't understand this. Suhaili says, أعجبه, like he استحسنه, he thought this was really amazing, their hospitality. And they were Abna'am, so because they're Kahlan and he was Himyar, so they're actually related from Saba bin Yashub bin Ya'rub bin Qahtan. So they're all from Qahtan. So he sent for some, and two Jews from Bani Qurayza came out, Ka'ab and Asad. And they told him, don't do what you're doing, because we can't guarantee you won't be destroyed because of it, because this is the muhajir of the last prophet. The last prophet will make hijrah here, and his name is Ahmad. And so Tubba was very moved by this, and the Jews explained to him their religion, and he ended up embracing Judaism. Because Jews don't really proselytize anymore, but they used to proselytize. And many Jews in Arabia were actually converts. And some of them would swear an oath if their child lived, because there was high infant mortality rate, they would raise it a Jew. So there are Jews that were in Medina that were actually originally Arabs that became Jews. In any case, these two went back with him. On their way, they met some people from Hudayl who tried to convince him to destroy the Kaaba. They actually just wanted to destroy him. And so the Jews told him, no, the Kaaba is, Abraham built that. So he's the first one to actually put the kiswa on the Kaaba. And the Prophet said, La tasubbu Tub'a. Do not curse Tub'a. فَكَانَ مُؤْمِنًا. He was a believer. And in a riwayah he said, La a'rifu hal kana nabi. Was he even a prophet? So Tub'a is a very interesting, but his people, initially they became, some of them followed him, and then other ones didn't, and they ended up being destroyed. But he was the one that spread Judaism amongst the Yemenis. And then you got Dhu Nuwas and Ashab al-Ukhdud, the story of the Jewish Yemeni who ended up, he's from the same group. He ended up persecuting the Christians in Najran and killing. I mean, they say 20,000, Allah Ta'ala alam. But then Allah says, "Barhum fi dabsin min kharqin jadid." They're bewildered or mystified. I think that's the way Dr. Cleary translates it as. No, but they are mystified about a new creation. In other words, confused about it. They bewildered by it. And then وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا. Verily, we created the human being, right? We did indeed create man, and we know what his ego suggests. So he translates nafs here as ego suggests. تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. And Allah says we are closer to him, to the human being, than al-habl al-warid. And so first of all, this is very important because it's letting us know, one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows our innermost thoughts. مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. So this is what's called the hadithun nafs. And it goes under 5 categories. So our scholars have very clearly delineated in the Arabic language the levels of thoughts. So the first ones are called hawajis. So hajasa shay. It's something, it's very fleeting, and you don't really, it doesn't settle. It's just a hajis. And the next one is called khatir. So a khatir is a thought that it settles, but there's no, it's not considered in that way. You don't dwell on it. You might have an insight, and then it goes. In fact, there's a great book by Ibn al-Jawzi, Abdurrahman ibn al-Jawzi, the great scholar and wa'il and muhaddith, called Sayyid al-Khatir, which is an amazing book. If you haven't read it, for some of the students of knowledge, it's really a very interesting book. But it's a book where he noticed that he would have these really interesting insights, but then he would forget them. He would think, oh, that's amazing, and how could I forget that? But then he'd find he forgot it. So he decided for 1 year to write down all of his insights, his khawatir. So that's the book. And they're amazing, because he was a great scholar. They're really interesting insights. So that's the khatir. And then the hadithun nafs. which is where you begin to consider something. You start thinking about it. You think about the possibilities, the ins and outs of it. And that leads to hum. So the hum is where now there's really, it's something you're seriously considering, but you haven't set out. There's no azima. So the hum is something like the Prophet hamma bil hijrati ila Juwatha. He considered seriously making hijrah to Juwatha. And in the Shafi'i method, I was told this by Shaykh Abdullah al-Qadi, that the Prophet's hum is also a type of sunnah. إِذَا hamma bi shay. It's a type of sunnah. It's not just his azima, it's also his hum. So, and then finally, the last one is azima. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes you to account for the hum, you get rewarded. If you man hamma bi hasana, fatuktab lahu hasana. Like if you have a hum of a good deed, it's actually written as one good deed for you. If you fulfill it, it goes to 10 ثم إلى أضعاف كثيرة, and then to multiply, manifold. So that's the hum of a hasana. If you have a hum of a sayyah, man hamma bi sayyatin falam ya'mal biha, kutibat lahu hasana. It's actually written as a hasana for you because you didn't do it. And then if you do it, then it's written as one sayyah as opposed to 10. This is the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the sayyat and the hasanat, the hum is considered, but you won't be taken into account for a bad thought, only the good ones. The Prophet ﷺ said in a very interesting hadith, he said, tajawaz, in a riwayah, it's in al-Bukhari, in fact it's in all 6 of the collection, so it's a really important hadith obviously. But he said, tajawaz li an ummati, and in the riwayah, tajawaz li ummati. Like Allah has tajawaz, he's excused for my ummah ma haddathat bihi anfusuhum, what their souls speak to them. So the internal dialogue. This is a rahmah from Allah because the previous communities were actually taken into account for their thoughts. So because of the rahmah of the Prophet ﷺ, this ummah is not taken into account for their thoughts. And that's why if you look, I mean that's a strong opinion. And so one of the, not that they're not taken into account, that the previous ummahs were taken into account. And there's indication from Christianity because Jesus said, if you have anger in your heart, it's like you murdered somebody. And he said, merely to look upon a woman is the same as committing adultery. And this is the teaching of Isa alayhi salam. So it's very different from the teaching of the Prophet alayhi salam, in that the Prophet said, غُضُّوا أَبْصَارَكُمْ. The Qur'an says, غُضُّوا أَبْصَارَكُمْ, lower your eyes. But the Prophet said, الْأُولَى لَكَ وَالثَّانِيَ عَلَيْكَ. The first is for you, the second is against you. That we're told to guard these gifts that we've been given, the 7 limbs. So the waswasa is the whispering. And Shaytan yuwaswisu, it's his real power. If Shaytan has any power at all, it's his ability to suggest. One of the things that Dr. Cleary told me once, which was really interesting, he said that the problem with America is it's not just a culture with a lot of vice, it's a suggestive culture. Like it actually encourages vice, as opposed to previous cultures where they really saw it as a very negative thing to encourage people to indulge in their appetites, obey your thirst. You know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, you know. So it's a suggestive culture. There was a company for people to commit adultery, and their tagline was, "Life is short, have an affair," which is crazy. And somebody actually broke into that website, and then it was a big scandal because all the people that were on the website ended up getting there. Allah yaftahuhum, you know. So that's very interesting, that Allah does not take to account the hadithun nafs, this inner. And some of the Sahaba, they came, جاء ناس من أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقالوا إن نجد في أنفسنا ما يتعاظم أحدنا أن يتكلم به. We find in ourselves things that occur that we're horrified of the idea of actually saying them out loud. And the Prophet said, وَتَجِدُونَ ذَلِكَ? Do you find that? And they said, نعم. He said, صَرِيحُ الْإِيمَانِ. That's pure faith. It's a beautiful statement. That's pure faith. In other words, whatever foul thoughts come to you and you reject them, that is faith. Because foul people, they don't. They actually act on them. Whereas the believer finds that. And that's why one of the things that Dr. Cleary used to talk about, and I think he framed it really well, he used to talk about the guest and the host. So he said, don't mistake the guest for the host. He said, negative thoughts are uninvited guests. They take over the house. But don't think that they're you. You're the host, and they're like a dayfan, like a tufayli that's come in, and they're just bothering you. And that's why Sidi Ahmad Zarruq said, وَمَا يُوَسُّسُ بِهِ شَيْطَانُ وَالْقَلْبُ الْيَأْبَأُ هُوَ الْإِيمَانُ. What Shaytan whispers and the heart rejects, that is faith. فَلَا تُحَاجِجْ عِنْدَهُ اللَّعِينَ فَإِنَّهُ يَزِيدُهُ تَمْكِينًا. So don't fight with those thoughts. Don't feel disgusted with yourself. Don't give them any reality. Just let them go. Just let them go. One of the miracles that many people have experienced, including myself, from this surah, is that it will help you with wasawis. There's no hadith that indicates that, but I think it's because this ayah is in there. But many people have said it's mujarrab, that they do that. And there are many things like that in the Qur'an, that they're just mujarrab. And they will say, many of our scholars will just say, وَقَدْ جُرِّبَ. You know, it's been tried and tested. Like you have falsifiability in science, you want to falsify something, you just test it and you do it. So another one obviously is قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ وَقُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ الْمُعَوِّذَتَيْن. Ahmad Zarruq recommends, if you have a lot of waswasa in your prayer, to say that before you enter into your prayer, right before you pray. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ مِنْ شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ. So there's two that do the whispering, right? And one of the dangers of allowing your ears, people to have open access to your ears, is that you can get thoughts that come in that you heard that you can't get rid of. And they will bother you from watching things that you shouldn't have watched or listening to things you shouldn't have listened to. They're called earworms. And that's literally the term that's used for them. Things that you can't get out of your head. And one of the Salaf, he said, I heard one of the people of bid'ah say something that's still bothering me after 20 years. He said it was still bothering me. So this is very important of not to. And then also the Prophet ﷺ said, Inna li-shaytani la-lammatan li-ibni Adam, right? Shaitan has a lamma, right? So this is like an affliction. Shaitan has a type of, he can have an effect on you. So there's a lamma, it's an effect. And he said, وَلِلْمَلَكِ لَمَّةٌ. And the angel has a lamma also. And he said, أما لمة الشيطان فهو إعاد بالشر والتكذيب بالحق. It's to promise evil and to deny the truth. Threaten you with evil and to deny the truth. That's the lamma of shaitan. And then he said the lammat al-malak is إعاد بالخير وتصديق بالحق. He will promise you good and he will verify the truth for you. So the Prophet said, فَمَنْ وَجَدْ if he finds the lammat al-marik, فَلْيَحْمَدِ اللَّهِ, right? Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, but if you find the other one from Shaytan, فَلْيَتَعَوَّذْ مِنْهُ, like seek refuge from أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. So that's the lemma. Imam al-Muhasibi, who really developed what's called ilm al-khawatir, he actually put the khawatir into 4 categories: Rabbani, Malakani, Shaytani, and Nafsani. So the Rabbani are very strong. They end up compelling you really to do good. The Malakani are suggestions of good. That's the lemma. It just suggests the good. And then the Shaytani is, it'll come with one. If it doesn't work, it'll come with another. So it shifts strategies. Whereas the Nafsani is more compulsive, right? The one that's telling you to eat the extra dessert after you already ate dessert. That's like the Nafsani. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. This is basically saying that Allah is with us. مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He's with you wherever you go. مَعِيَّةَ الْعِلْمِ. His knowledge is with us wherever we are. Allah is with us. Habl al-Warid, there's different views on it. The majority definitely say it's the jugular vein. That's the majority. Some say it's al-Watin, which is the aorta. Some say, the Arabs now, and even Lisan al-Arab, they differentiate between sharayin and awrida. So the sharayin tend to be the arteries, and then the awrida are the... Although Ibn Haytham, and in Lisan al-Arab it says it's what carries the nafas, which is the oxygen, the habl al-warid. And that would be the carotid artery. And they also say it's, some of them say it's under al-irq alladhi yantafikhu 'inda al-ghadab. It's under the one that fills up when somebody gets angry, and that's the jugular vein, which is called the wadaj. And they say it's under it. It would also indicate, it would make more sense that it was under it because it's closer to the, and then it's, anyway, the point being is that it's aqrab. Like it's, the Arabs say, huwa minni ma'qad al-izar. He's like the buckle on my belt. That's how tight the two are. In fact, we say, in slang, I'm tight with him. In other words, we're very close. So Allah is just letting us know that nobody is closer to us than Allah, that Allah knows our innermost thoughts. And the angels don't know our thoughts. Shaytan doesn't know our thoughts. The angels, it has to be uttered. And this is a sitr from Allah. So you have to utter it. And that's why, where they put this in Bab al-Waswasa, in the books of hadith? Does anybody know? Out of the 6 books, 5 of them put it in Bab al-Talaq, in the book of divorce. Because somebody might want to and think about it, but then they don't. So they're saying it's not a divorce if you just hammabi. Even if you had azima, you have to actually utter it. They say the waswasa, the khatir, the ham, and even the azima, لو طلق في ذهنه أهله لم تطلق. He has to utter it, and then once it's uttered. So those are the and then إذ يترقى المترقيان على اليمين وعن الشمال قعيد. So that's why some of the ulama say that وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ, it's the malaika that are actually the ones there. إِذْ يَتَرَقَّى, because that إِذ there is to indicate that when at that point. نحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد إذ يتلقى المتلقيان عن اليمين وعن الشمال قعيد ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. So no word is uttered except there is a raqib and an atid. So these are the two angels. Raqib, Mujahid said raqib here means the one who's sorry, the qa'id, he said, means the one who's muraqib, the one who's watching. And then it's, even though it's singular, it means both on the right and the left. So the angel on the right is recording the good deeds. The angel on the left is recording the, according to the hadith, the angel on the right is the amir of the two. And so even if you have a hum, it's written, right, of the good deed that you if you have a make an intention to do something, and then if you make the intention to do something bad, the one on the right says to wait. So he's told to delay it to the end of the day to see if he does istighfar, and if he does istighfar, it's removed. So this is like the editing that we're allowed to do with our lives, you know, because on the Yom Al-Qiyamah, there's something called the ard, which according to Imam al-Awza'i, he said the ard is hayatul insan tu'radu alayhi sa'atan sa'atan. His whole life is shown to him moment by moment. So this is, and now we have again, sanurihim ayatina, sa'urikum, right? Ayati. We will show you our signs. فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُوا. Don't try to hasten these signs. Now we have recording. People record their lives now. There's whole people that they have their cameras on in their apartments and everything, and they're just showing the world their lives, and it's all being recorded. So we have this phenomenon now, which is amazing, where you can record events and then you can see the events. But we're given the ability to edit them, which is tawbah. And there's a great Imam al-Junayd, radiyallahu anhu, they were discussing what tawbah was. And one of the ulama in the circle, he said, tawbah alla yansa dhanbak, that you never forget your sin. And then they asked Junayd, and he said, alla tadhkur dhanbak, that you never remember your sin. Like the real tawbah, it's you believe that Allah has completely obliterated it. So these are the angels that and then we have obviously the guardian angels. There's an angel that records the salah on Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But they're the 10 angels. And the angels only leave us in taghawwat and jima'. Those are the two times the angels leave us in when we go to the WC, the washroom, water closet, that's what they used to call it, and in intimacy with one's spouse. What's the time? 6:15. 6:50. Oh, yeah. So maybe any questions? Hassan. Depends on the question. Yeah.
That's what it means. So my question is that I told her I don't know. I will ask and I'll confirm and I'll.
I mean, if somebody knows the Prophet ﷺ is a true prophet and they reject that, that's not a good place to be in. You know, so the Mufassirun say that those are for the previous, before the advent of the Prophet ﷺ. that those who followed previous prophets of their time, every group is raised up with their prophets. Imam al-Ghazali, I think of all the ulama, has the most nuanced view, because he argues that people who have lived amongst Muslims and been shown true Islam, they will be taken into account. But he said people that haven't, or have been shown negative Islam, and they reject a negative version of Islam, which is why the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man adha li dhimmiyan fa ana khasmuhu yawm al-qiyamah." Whoever harms one of the people, the protected minorities in my community, like Jews and Christians or Hindus, because the Muslims accepted Hindus and Zoroastrians according to the Maliki madhab. And I think that was even though the Shafi'is don't have that opinion, but the Hanafis and the Malikis took that opinion. So they took, even the mushrikun, except on the Arabian Peninsula, but even the mushrikun could live under the Muslims. There's not an idea that you have to, this thing. Even umirtu an uqatil an-nas hatta yashhadu an la ilaha illallah. That hadith is khas bin Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not it's khas. It's from the Prophet's khasa'is. The Arabian Peninsula was a special place for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there couldn't be la yajtami'u dinani fi jazirat al-arab. And then the Jazeera, even like people say, oh well, in the Gulf now they have non-Muslims living there. I mean, Muslims can come in temporary. They can't be permanent residents. But also the Gulf, not all the ulama consider that part of the Arabian Peninsula that the Prophet was sallallahu alaihi wasallam was talking about. Most say it's the Hijaz. There's different opinions about that. So, but I mean, I knew a scholar. I mean, he was a good scholar. He did his PhD on Ghazali, and I gave a talk at his university, and we were on our way to the airport, and he said, what's the Ash'ari opinion about somebody who knows Islam is true, but then they never say the Shahada? So I knew that he was talking about himself. I just said, I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. Yeah. It's like, Imam Muhammad al-Ghazali, the Egyptian, he was asked, like, what's the hukm of tariq al-salah? Because there's a khilaf. Like the Hanbali say, if you leave the prayer, you're not a Muslim anymore. Like if you don't pray, even if you just leave it out of laziness. That's the strictest position. The other three imams, they say, لا نكفر بذنب لا بتركه ولا بفعله. We don't make takfir of a dhanb either through tark or fi'l. Like the kaba'ir, that's the Khawarij did that. So he was asked, what's the hukm of somebody who leaves the prayer? He said, حكمك فيه أن تأخذه إلى المسجد. Like your hukm with him is take him to the masjid, get him to pray again. Yeah. So people are too concerned about where other people are going. It's just a big problem in our community.
It is a big problem.
Yeah. We should be more considerate about where we're going. Allahu a'lam where everybody else is going. People, the kafirun, according to the Qur'an, are going to hell. But if you read the kafirun in the Qur'an, they're puffed up, they're full of pride, they hate the truth, they do takdeeb, they have istihza. I mean, look at the qualities of the kuffar, and then ask yourself about people around you that you see that aren't like that. And maybe our fault is that we've been such bad exemplars, people are no longer attracted to Islam. Because there was a time when everybody who became to know the Muslims wanted to become Muslim. I mean, there still are a lot of people that become Muslim just from living with Muslims because they see the good Islam. But then there's other people that are very alienated from it. I mean, I had a professor of religious studies who was a beautiful man, he's a really, really good man. But he had a very negative experience on the Allenby Bridge. It was during one of the horrible periods, but he had a very negative experience with Muslims. And it really tainted his view of Islam. And, we had a lot of conversations about it. And he said, I've been forced to really reassess my Islam. I had the same experience with a black minister from Philadelphia, who for him, the Islam was the mafia, the Muslim mafia in Philadelphia. Because there was this kind of Muslim mafia in Philadelphia. And that's how he viewed Islam. He just thought that was Islam. So there's a lot of people that really have a negative view of Islam. And it's our challenge is, how do we break those barriers down? How do we show them what real Islam is? I mean, part of it is just, one of the hallmarks of Islam is it's beautiful. It's not an ugly religion.
Right.
All traditional Islam is beautiful. Our architecture is beautiful. Our clothes were beautiful. Food was beautiful. Food presentation was beautiful. Everything the Muslims did, their calligraphy, nobody's matched Muslim calligraphy. Nobody. I mean, you go and look at somebody asked Titus Burckhardt, if you could point to Islam, what would you point to? He said the Taj Mahal. And on the one hand, that's not entirely true, but there's some truth in it, that whoever built that, the people that built that, something inside them was amazing, because everybody all over the world is attracted to that place, and it was from love. It was built out of love, right? Apparently, in today's money, it's $11 billion to build it. So he almost exhausted. But India was so rich. I mean, India was one of the richest countries in the world, and it will return, inshallah. Why not? But also with Muslims. It's just, yeah. I mean, I think the biggest tragedy of India is the Muslims never indigenized fully, because the court was always a Persian court. So the Mughal were always seen as kind of invaders. And that's why Hindutva, it recognizes Buddhism, because Buddhism is from Mother India. It recognizes Jainism, because it's from Mother India. It recognizes Sikhism, even though Sikhism is heavily influenced by Muslims. But it doesn't recognize Christianity or Islam, because it sees them as alien religion. And one of the genius of the Muslims is, wherever they went, they indigenized. They always indigenize. So every Muslim culture has its own dress. They didn't make everybody look like Arabs or speak like Arabs. Arabic was the language of our learning, and it becomes the lingua franca, to use that term. It was the language that we were all able to speak to each other with. So Ibn Khaldun or Ibn Battuta could go from Tangier and go to Sri Lanka, and he would be able to communicate with people. So it was like French used to be the diplomatic language. Everybody spoke French. Now it's English. English has become the global language that people speak with. So, but there's the idea of Arabizing people is very alien to the early Islam. They didn't do that. In fact, Sayyid al-Mawaq al-Abdari, he says, he's one of the last great Andalusian scholars. He says that all the hadiths about man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum are to the Arabs. They don't apply to the Ajam. In other words, the Arabs were not, all the ones that warn about dressing and things like that, he said it was all for the Arab not to become somebody else, to maintain their Arabian identity, because they have a quality that's very important. Their language and their adat, they have a lot of good qualities. The best qualities of the Arabs have spread all over the Muslim world, because generosity is a quality of the Prophet ﷺ, but it was also a profound quality of his people. So wherever the Muslims went, because of their generosity, even a culture who would not necessarily be a generous culture became generous by taking on the qualities of the Prophet ﷺ, which are Muslim qualities, but there are also some of them are Arabian qualities. Yeah, Walid, marhaba, alaikum. Naam. Ramadan Mubarak alayna.
So, Sheikh, I wanted to ask just a little bit, when you were saying that the Shaytan al-waswasa, and the Shaytan has the leeway in that regard, but then the ayah says, "Tuwaswisu bihi nafsuhu." I'm just trying to understand, is nafs and Shaytan, or is that?
I mean, yeah, Shaytan and nafs are two. The nafs is the egoistic force that we have. It's the ruh that's not purified, but it also means self. So you know, تعلم ما في نفسي ولا أعلم ما في نفسك. I mean, Isa alayhi salam says nafs for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنَفْسُهُ, يعني nafs is used in Arabic to جاء زيد نفسه. Zayd came himself. So it means self, but it also has a negative quality. So the you know, Ibn Ajibah says that ruh, qalb, sir, nafs, aql, those are all types of synonyms for the same phenomenon, which is our immaterial consciousness. And so the nafs has appetites, right, which is related to its embodiment, because the nafs, we're embodied. So we're a soul that's in a body. But the tawassus bi nafsuhu is the hadithun nafs, that we have a hadithun nafs. And then there's the external, there's shayateen, right? So there's influences that are external. So these are forces, you know, the Prophet ﷺ told us about them and gave us lots of protection from them to protect us from them. Like for instance, I mean, sufidat إذا فتحت أبواب رمضان, you know, when إذا جاء رمضان فتحت أبواب الرحمة, right? The doors of mercy are opened up, and وأغلقت, you know, أبواب الشر وصفدت الشياطين. The shayateen are, they have a, it doesn't mean they're gone completely, but they're diminished in their, they don't have the same غلت in a riwayah, sulsilat in a riwayah. There's a chain which they don't have the type of movement that they have in normal times. And then some say it's the marada only. I mean, there's difference of opinion. But Imam al-Qurtubi said, you see evil in Ramadan. And he said, it shows you how bad the nafs is also. You know, that people are evil. And then there's shayateen ins, who you know, they're people that have completely capitulated to demonic forces. But whatever those forces are in the world, we've been warned about them. There are some people that want to reduce them to kind of psychological things and neuropeptides that flow in the blood thing. I mean, their reality is that they're there, and we have to acknowledge them as forces that are negative, that affect us. Inna shaytan yajri fi ibni adam majari ad-dam. Shaytan flows in the blood. What does that mean?
But I just tie into his question, I think what you said, I really like the fact that, I mean, I come from a country where I think one of the problems that, like when you talk about, when there's no positive energy, there's a negative energy. It's like when you lack a role model of Islam in your home country or your society, that's where that demonic influence start happening on. I mean, this is where, I mean, you don't have to go to Philadelphia. I mean, I was born in a country, many people came from a country where Islam didn't even exist. I mean, you didn't find a good role model. I mean, I found it here when I came to the US. So, but eventually you see that when you don't have a good role model, that eventually that, you know, a lot of people go through the waswasa and they follow these roads of.
Well, also, you know, part of the Ramadan is for us to learn to control our nafs, right? Because you know, the way Allah has created the human being, He put the head on top, and then the, you know, the sadr, and then the stomach, and then the genitals. When people are controlled by their stomach and their genitals, they reverse the order. It's qalb al-haqa'iq. And so you know, fasting is really putting that correct order. And that's why even to get angry, Allahumma inni sa'im, you know, you say, I'm fasting. It's to train you how to control, you know, the Jahili Arabs. I mean, Jahiliya, one of the meanings of Jahiliya is zealotry, you know, hamiyya, you know, إذ جعل في قلوبهم حمية الجاهلية, you know, when they take on that hamiyya of jahiliyyah. And jahal in Arabic, one of the meanings of it is to boil, you know, to boil. Like وَدُهْمٍ تُصَادِيهَا الْوَلَائِدُ جِلَّةٍ إِذَا جَهِلَتْ أَجْوَافُهَا لَمْ تَحَلَّمِ. This is al-Bahili, Amr ibn Ahmar al-Bahili. He's boasting about that in his camp, the pots are black because they're constantly being cooked. Like he's talking about his generosity. And then he says, you know, our women are constantly stirring the pot. Tusadiha wala'idu jillatan, these big giant pots. إِذَا جَهِدَتْ أَجْوَابُهَا, when the pot boils over, lam tahallami, it doesn't halim, it doesn't become calmed down. So the halim is the one who doesn't boil over. The Prophet kana ahlam an-nas. He was the most he had the most equanimity. Like his soul was balanced. He never lost his temper. You don't see anywhere in the hadith. And Umar radiallahu anhu, who's a wonderful character in that amongst the Sahaba, and part of his purpose is one, to show the transformation, because Umar he lost his temper very easily. He was a choleric nature, and he would lose his temper, and the Prophet would always calm him down. Aisha radiallahu anha, when the Jew walked by and said "Salam alaikum," she cursed them, and the Prophet said, don't curse them, right? She got upset. The ghayra took her. So the Prophet was always calming people down, and that one of the beautiful stories of the Aus and the Khazraj, they had this Yom Bu'ath, which is when they when they would remember their fighting. They used to fight each other in the Jahiliyyah. And there was an older man from Medina, Yathrib, who was very upset that the Prophet had brought the Aus and Khazraj together. So he hired this Jewish youth, he was a Rawi, to go and stir up the Aus and the Khazraj by reciting lines of poetry from the Jahiliyyah about the Yom Bu'ath. So then the Aus heard their lines, and then the Khazraj heard. They started getting angry. They started, exchanging. And then they said, "We'll meet you there. Get your weapons, and we'll meet you there." And then the Prophet got wind of it, and he ran out, and he said, "You're doing this, and I'm amongst you." Like he couldn't believe. And right when they saw the Prophet ﷺ, and when he told them, "Asbahtum bi ni'mati ikhwana, kuntum ala shafa hufratin min an-nar," like you were, and then now you're brought. They all started crying and hugging each other and asking forgiveness. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. Know that the Prophet ﷺ is amongst. I mean, that's why, like in Morocco, whenever, because I lived there for a while, and whenever any type of fight or anything would break out, somebody would shout, "Allahumma salli ala nabi." They do that in many Muslim countries. It's like they want to bring the presence of the Prophet ﷺ into the gathering so that people remember. They remember. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. The Prophet ﷺ, and he's amongst us. His sunnah is here. His teaching is here. Wherever his teaching is being taught, the Prophet his spirit is present. So we have to understand that, that all these things that we see, I mean, these are things. The Prophet ﷺ, تُعْرَضَ عَلَيَّ أَعْمَالُ أُمَّتِي, عَلَيَّ أَعْمَالُ أُمَّتِي. The actions of my ummah are shown to me. This is a sahih hadith. He sees the actions of the ummah, and he said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُ خَيْرًا حَمِدْتُ اللَّهِ. When I see good, I thank Allah. وَإِذَا رَأَيْتُ غَيْرَ ذَلِكَ اسْتَغْفَرْتُ لَهُمْ. And if I see other than that, I ask forgiveness for them. So it's very important for Muslims. I mean, this book, we have to get back to the book, the Qur'an. And this book is this is the basis of his everything that he taught is here, and then his sunnah is the exposition of it. It's just he expands on it through his everything that he does. But it's a big problem. We have this problem in the Muslim world. There are many places where the sunnah is just absent, and even the ulama now. There's so many ulama. I mean, if we can call them ulama, there's so many ulama that they just attack other ulama online now. They like the internet. I mean, it's just amazing. They had one scholar in Kuwait, he said something, and then scholars all over start posting things and attacking, and it's just subhanallah. So if these are the quote unquote learned people, what do you expect from the Amma? Like people that don't have the knowledge. They get very confused. So this is one of the things the Prophet ﷺ said, يُصْبِحُ الْحَلِيمُ حَيْرَانًا, that in these latter days, even sagacious people would become perplexed and confused. So there are difficult times, and we have to remember the Prophet ﷺ to restore that spirit. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, just to bring him back into our lives as the exemplar. And there's a beautiful hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said to Abu Umama, he said to him, he said that inna qalbi, he said, my heart inclines towards some believers, you know, like that there's some people that have a special place in his heart, and those are the people that follow his sunnah the strongest. And the real sunnah is akhlaq. I mean, these other sunnahs are, you know, they're beautiful, and I'm not going to diminish their worth. You know, the beard is a sunnah, you know. I mean, most of the ulama say it's a wajib, but some ulama say it's a sunnah. Qadi Iyad mentioned that, and Wal Mayaba mentions that in Zad al-Muslim fima ittafaqa alayhi al-Bukhari wa Muslim. But akhlaq is the real sunnah, and that's what's been lost, you know, is the akhlaq of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. His hilm, right? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول بيننا وبين معاصيك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغ به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تهون به مصائب الدنيا ومتعنا بأسماعنا وأبصارنا وقوتنا أبدا ما أحييتنا واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا وانصرنا على من عادانا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا غاية رغبتنا ولا إلى النار مصيرنا ولا تسلط علينا بذنوبنا من لا يخافك ولا يرحمنا يا أرحم الراحمين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Ameen, ameen. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Hamza. What a beautiful class and a beautiful ending, alhamdulillah.